Hey everybody, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Wendy Yee.
I'm Chris Yee.
I'm always excited every year to play the newest Uwe Rosenberg big game. He comes out with one almost every year.
Which is impressive.
It is. And they're kind of varying degrees for me. You know, there's the highs of the highs, the Feast Froden, Le Havre, Caverna, Agricola. Mm-hmm. And then they're never really low, but they're just not as exciting, some of them.
I think his only truly bad game I know of is one of his small box ones.
Sure, but the big box, there's definitely the lower tier ones. I don't get a lot of people asking to play Newsfjord. A lot of people aren't playing
Loyang.
Gates of Loyang and things like that.
Which is some people's favorite. But yeah, it's not as much as buzzworthy.
Yeah.
Sure, even the one that came out a couple years ago, I forget what the name of it is. It's about farming. You know what? They're always about farming. This one is about collecting fruit off trees. And actually, this is a really cool theme here, and I didn't know much about this Ghana, about the bats.
It's really unique.
Yeah, it
surprised me, yeah.
It came with an information booklet in it. I always like those type of touches.
Did you read the information booklet? Because I didn't.
I like that it came in it.
How could you not read the...
Because I was really busy. But I do know that the bats are pollinating, and these trees grow the fruit, and there's like a system. And that's what this game is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thematic mechanics.
I'll show you how it plays. We're going to start this explanation by showing you a player board, because so much of what's going on is controlled by your player board, as well as kind of the points that you have in this game. So you're collecting gold. Gold is worth points. You're also going to be building a tableau of cards. You can have up to 4 cards in each row, and you'll start with 1, but as the game goes by, you'll add them. And some of them, this one's worth 0 points. This one's actually worth -2 points as you play these cards out. But like this town here is worth 13 points. So those are going to be worth points at the end of the game. But also you have this board here, and as this game progresses, you're going to be constantly moving things from this board to matching spaces on your tableau. And in fact, many spaces, like this one is a blank space, but it can hold something if you already have that on the card. And as you pull these off, there is a number on all of these that you will score points for at the end of the game. Now that number for these animals and trees, fruit, isn't very high, but the number on people is 25 if you get that out at the end of the game. You're also going to get bonus points if you train your families. So a trained family is going to be worth an extra bonus point. And there's going to be a lot of bats in this game. And at the end of the game, you will count all your bats, subtract 10 from that number, and that's how many points you get. So that's kind of a big deal. It's also possible to lose points over the course of the game by not feeding your people. And I do want to mention that here because this board is really important. As you take things off the different rows, you will have a production. So you can see I have 3 fruit off, I get a bat at the end of every round. If I get 5 fruits off, I'm going to get 2 bats. But so the trees produce fruits, the animals can produce trees, and the fruits produce bats. The bottom 2 are pretty critical though, because as you have families out on the board, they're going to require a certain amount of food. And then the number of goats you have out will be subtracted. So if my board looks like this right now, at the end of every round, I need 9 food. I'm getting 4 food. I'm going to have to get food in other ways, which could be a fruit is 1 food, or a goat is 3 food. So you're going to be constantly taking things off and putting them back on this board. Now, all of this is handled by this main board here in a worker placement game where each person is going to have these 3 workers that you're going to put out each turn. The game is going to take place over 7 rounds, and there's kind of a really unique aspect here where you're going to put out a bunch of tiles that are going to be like this. So it's round 1. Round 1 shows me some production stuff that's going to happen. And there's a space here which says I get to take a family and add it to my cards if I have a spot for it. And I can upgrade one family from a regular family to a trained family. But after the end of round 1, this is going to slide here to show round 2, and some things are going to change. But what's on the spaces is going to change. And that's kind of a neat concept there as you move these along. So there's a wide range of places to put people here. Like here, I can pay 1 gold and get 2 sheep. Here, I get a tree with a fruit on top of that tree and a goat. At the top of the board, you're going to see spots to get these terrain cards. There's a deck full of terrain cards. These are kind of random cards that are worth a certain number of points, but have spots to put things. Like the mountain has spots to put goats, a tree, the bat, while this plantation is just a spot for trees. And so there's all kinds of different things. When you go to this spot, this one gives me a tree with a fruit on it and the card above it. This one gives me a bat and the card above it. But you can always go here and just take a tree and the random top card. I just got a mangrove forest. At the bottom, you can go down here, and here you pay gold. Remember, gold's worth points, but you will then get this spot here, and this is mostly where you're going to be able to put out the villagers, which is a big way to score points over the course of the game. And so there's 2 spots, although one is clearly better than another. By the way, this end of the board here will flip based on the number of players. I have it showing on the 4-player side, but there's lots of different things you can do. You can, some of the things that you have, if I buy this plantation, for example, there's a little blossom symbol there, and some of these spaces give you a gold for every blossom, or train a family for every blossom. But the game itself is not particularly complex, because most of what you're doing is you're just getting resources, taking them off your board, and putting them on your other board. That's pretty much the whole game. The game is going to be manipulating your player board and taking animals and trees and fruits off of it, putting them in spots that you have, slowly building out your tableau. You might have wondered about these trained and untrained families. There is a difference. An untrained family can eat bats, which seems kind of gross, but it is what it is. A trained family can have a bat put on them, and untrained families give you a gold every turn, like a production thing. Untrained families make you pull pollution from a bag, which may have 1 or 2 gold. This one has none, but unfortunately that pollution will go on a spot on your board, blocking that spot and not allowing you to put things out. And your board can fill up with pollution. It's not going to be excessive, but there can be a decent amount of pollution on your board if you don't train your families. So like I said, the game is going to take place over 7 rounds. After the 7th round, you do your final scoring, and whoever has the most points is the winner. So first thing is, when it comes to talking about or even looking at this game looks like a fairly convoluted game. And in some of his games, Feast for Odin is a big game.
It's a big game. It was a game that we were scared of before we played it.
Yeah, and I think for good reason. Feast for Odin is not something to be taken lightly. And honestly, even though they're fairly easy, Caverna, in my opinion, Caverna and Le Havre are also big games. This one is smaller than those. It doesn't look like it, though. It looks like a big, convoluted game. I don't think it's that complicated to play.
I agree that I don't think it's that complicated to play. It honestly made me think of Agricola Family, where there's some good stuff going on. There's an interesting engine, but I also don't know if I'm going to play this time and time and time again, because it doesn't have as much variability as some of his other games.
Yeah, the not just the family version of base box Agricola, but the little smaller one they came out with. This is, I think that my biggest kudos for this is the theme, the setting. I like that it's just something, it doesn't just feel like farming again. You know, I like that little bit of change up, and with that comes this interesting ecosystem.
Now, I said it's not as big as Feast for Odin, but there definitely is a lot of places to put your workers. Like, someone's going to go to the spot you want, and it's kind of I found that there's a weird curve in the game. At the beginning of the game, it's get some cards. And then after you get some cards, then as the game progresses, you're like, get stuff to put on those cards. And at the end of the game, you're like, how do I get points? I definitely need to get people out, you know. And it's going to be that way. And that's actually one of my negatives about the game. And I like the game. But one of my negatives is, and you just mentioned it, it's not going to be, it looks like a big, diverse game, but it's not particularly.
No, you're going to do the same things. I think you do a lot of the same things over the course of the game. I know that there's a little bit more focus on building up areas at the start, but you are always trying to take advantage of that ecosystem, the life cycle. The wild animals allow more trees, and then trees grow more fruit, and then fruit attracts more bats. You're kind of doing that same cycle the whole, like every round of the game. I
do agree. I don't feel like your arch has to be the same every game that you play, though. Like when Chris and I played against each other, we did different strategies. So we still did all the same things. We worked on the trees and the berries or the fruit or whatever. We did that, and we built up our people and made people happy so they didn't eat bats anymore. And made that all work cohesively and nicely together. But we did it at very different levels. I think you went way heavier into the training your people, whereas I barely trained my people, but I went really heavy into the trees and the fruit and stuff.
Wendy polluted.
I polluted. I'm terrible to the environment. But Like, I feel like I agree that there is that single arch, and I don't know how many times I'm going to replay this game and still have it feel fresh and exciting. But I also like that you don't have to just do one thing.
I agree, but you do need to get more terrain tiles. You can't afford to not do that. And you do need to put almost everything out on the board, as much as you can. So there's one mechanism I didn't mention in the rules overview. You have this other card. It looks like a terrain card, but it's called a cave and has 9 bats on it. And every time you put out a worker, you are allowed to take 3 bats, put them on that card, and then you can also discard 1 fruit to build a new tree. Mm-hmm. It's very thematic. The rule book says if you forget to do it, you can remind people and they can do it later. And that's good, because everyone forgets to do it all the time.
Did you forget to put it in the overview?
No, I'm mentioning it now.
It's so easy to forget.
It's so easy to forget. I actually forgot to put it in the overview. Yes, but
it's its own card.
It's
but
a clunky. I can't imagine why any playtester didn't go, can you cut this? It's like a whole extra rule for you put a tree out on the board. It's not even that exciting.
And maybe they did, but they liked the thematic tie-in.
I guess.
Rosenberg's accused of not being a very thematic designer. Oh, it's farming in Germany again. But he's actually quite thematic. You know, both at the micro level of these types of buildings do these types of things, but also in the larger scope of things. He puts theme into his game, and that's why, like I said, that's I think one of the most positives I can say about this is that the theme isn't just fluff. It's not just let's do farming but somewhere else, and that mechanism is quite thematic. But I don't necessarily like the mechanism itself.
I don't dislike it either. I just felt like it was an extra step I would have cut from the game.
It's forgettable. That's what it is.
And the other thing I thought was is the pollution. Okay, so the pollution is like your first pollution. You put in the center row of your leftmost card, and then you do that. Then you move over, and I'm like, are you kidding me? And there's all these rules about putting out pollution, but it's not even really that big of a deal. Not once, ever. I think I could play the worst possible game of this, and I wouldn't sit there and go, the pollution is hurting me. It's like the least worrisome pollution I've ever come across in a game.
Yeah.
Sure. Which is not bad, because this is kind of a breezier game.
Yeah.
It's not a high-stress game, so I'm glad it's not necessarily high stress, but it's that question of, is the rules overhead worth the impact it has on the game?
I think that it made me make different choices because of pollution, because you don't want that. Because at the end of the game...
No, you don't want it.
You don't want it, but it's hard to get those tiles, and you have a very tight action economy, and so... If you have to, if you get 4 or 5 pollution, that's 4 or 5 things you can't put out on your board. That's less points you're getting.
Yeah.
So I feel like it matters. I don't think that it's super detrimental.
No,
but I think it matters.
Also, I would maybe I will read the book, because pollution done in this very low-tech society seems like an odd thing.
It's not industrial pollution necessarily, but just different effects of...
Overusing the land. Not
Right.
being as cohesive with it.
Eating the bats
Less synergy.
that feed into the ecosystem. Like I said, thematically really well done.
Mm-hmm.
For me, overall, the game is a 7. It's a strong 7. I'm not barely liking it. I enjoy it. It is essentially a puzzle as you're sitting there trying to put out all these pieces on the board. They go back on your board, then they come off. And you're trying to make more come off than go back on as the game goes by. Because at the end of the game, the more off you have, the better you are. The more points you're going to get, because that's where the vast majority of your points are probably coming from. I like that puzzle. I don't particularly care what everyone else is doing. I'm having a good time. Yes, you'll block my spots where I want to go occasionally, but it's mostly about my own little puzzle and building it. And so I have a lot of fun with that. It's not particularly difficult. I remember the first time I played Feast for Odin, and it was like, hey, you want to cover up as much of that board as possible. And after my first game, I was like, is that possible? And now when I play it, I'm like, yeah, you can do it. Not only do I cover that board, I'm going to cover 2 other boards. But it was a learned process. In my first game of Atiwa, I was like, I didn't know I could get almost everything off my board on my first game. I didn't get it all off. Mm-hmm. But in future games, I can get another piece off, but it's just an easier game to play. I didn't sit there and go, I don't know, how do people do well at this game? I think you will. And the scores seem to be balanced when I play it, but I like it. It's enjoyable. I would equate it to almost Glass Road in its level of complexity from the Rosenberg games. But I do wonder if I'll remember it in a few years, other than the theme.
Okay, I'm going to also give it a 7 for similar reasons. I think my biggest one is just that I remember playing Agricola Family and loving it, and then 3 plays later, I was done. And I felt like, cool, I found the arc, I did the arc 3 times, I'm done. And I feel like that's what's going to happen with this. So I do enjoy it. I think that I especially like how thematic it is. But I feel like at the end of the day, kind of like what you said, I think it's going to be forgettable just because I can only play it so many times before I'm ready for something new.
Interesting. So I'm coming in at a 6.5. Because I almost could recommend it if not for some of those concerns. I think that being able to, on the first play, get all of the people out, get all the huts out, and get that huge amount of points, I'm like, oh, okay. I thought it was going to be a bit harder.
Then if I feel like it should be more of an effort. It's almost like a participation trophy. You're like, oh, I did better than I thought.
Right. So it's not, and like I said, I'm not saying that this is a game that's bad. A 6.5, I can almost recommend it. I did play it solo. I was hoping that maybe the solo would also elevate it a bit for me because it uses the Feast for Odin worker placement system. You have 3 different colors of workers. You put 3 out, and then the next round you use a different color, but you can't go to the spots that you used with the previous colors. And I like that, but it wasn't as exciting in this one. So I think that's the thing, is everything I look at, I go, I really like the theme. I really like this. I like these things, but it just doesn't quite do it for me. But there's definitely nothing wrong with trying this one, and maybe it'll sing to you more than it did for me. So 6.5 for me.
And I wouldn't mind if that sliding mechanism of the rounds, and it changes the action spaces, I wouldn't mind if that showed up in another game. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, very easy round tracker.
I thought it was cool, but I don't feel like it made a huge difference.
It didn't, but it's cool, and I like to see it in a game where it does make a difference.
Sure.
Where when you slide this over, I'm like, oh, that combo is great. So
Yes.
I don't know. Anyway, that's Atiwa?
Atiwa.
Yeah, this game, the bat game, that's what people are going to call it. I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Wendy Yee.
I'm Chris Yee.
Eat your fruit, kids.